Lions.
And this is as you're getting into this one, Nat, this is one of the more disgusting teams with one to two players, though, that really, really intrigue me.
Yeah, I probably know who you're talking about, but we'll get into that in a second. I was going to say probably Swift and Hockenson, and that's what you just put up on the screen.
Probably right.
Anyway, all right. So anyway, the Lions. We alluded to their horrible receiving core when we were talking about some of the bum receiving cores in the NFC days earlier, and after 2 days of anticipation, we're actually going to go into them. All right, but we're going to start with the leader of the ship, Jared Goff. Goff, you got down for 363 out of 560, a little over 4,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, 14 picks. I have written next to him, I consider him a total non-factor in fantasy, a low-end guy in a 2-quarterback league. You got him as your quarterback 23 based on the projections, which is actually down a little bit. And then you got him, I think, as your 30 on the big board, which I think is probably more how you feel about him.
100% right, because in my projections, he might even be coming up like ahead of Trey Lance, who I might have only for a half season of stats. But I think those half seasons of stats are going to be so meaningful. I agree 100%.
Doesn't mean you would take him over that guy. You certainly wouldn't.
Never. Certainly not. And I think exactly how you describe him. Very low end QB2. Like in those, if you have a super flex league and he's sitting there, why not? There is the narrative that the Lions are going to blow, and I think that's a very true narrative. That
it's a strong narrative, right?
Very strong narrative. So he is going to have to chuck most likely. I really think, though, as you can see with my holistic team projections, minus 51 in league average and total plays, I think they're going to make their best attempt at slowing games down, bleeding clock, running until the doors are just so blown off that they have to chuck in the second half. And Goff just doesn't really have that great of an arm or that great of weaponry to do that much damage, even in these positive script scenarios that he's going to find. So as a desperation best ball last quarterback pick, there's going to be a couple 25-point weeks where he just throws 3 touchdowns because they have to go bad. Maybe, right. He was good with Sean McVay. I mean, he had 3 top 10 seasons across 4 with Sean McVay, but this is a completely different defense. Completely different weapons. Like I think McVay covered a ton of his faults, and it's just a bridge to whenever they have their next future guy in the future, next year or whenever they draft him. There's no real reason to draft Jared Goff. That is not the sexiest aerial pie, and that's why these receiving core, there's not going to be a ton of guys we're really hyping up here.
We certainly will not be. We're going to be talking about the running backs real quick, and you are interested in DeAndre Swift, but then we will get into the main reason that despite Goff's past fantasy excellence, like you said, 3 top 10 seasons, he was throwing to different guys, and we're going to talk to you about the guys he is throwing to in just a second. But anyway, DeAndre Swift, you got him down for 216, almost 1,000 yards on the ground, 6 touchdowns. More importantly, you got him for almost 70 catches for 545 and 4 touchdowns. Those numbers actually, I think, are down a little bit for you, but still substantial running back production out of the backfield catching balls. You had your numbers go up a little across the board for Swift, rushing specifically, but you did drop him a couple spots. He's now your running back 13 on the projection board, and you got him at 18 on the big board. You're projecting him essentially to split carries with Jamaal Williams 60-40, something like that. It's a back by committee as far as I'm concerned. But then you do have him catching a lot more balls, although you do have Williams catching quite a few balls as well, maybe 50. I don't know. Is this just, that skyrockets his numbers? Is this just a pass catching thing? It seems like you don't really believe in him.
Yeah, it's one of those tricky things. I will say I believe in the player 100%. I believe in the talent every time he's gotten the opportunity. I mean, there's the stats. I tweeted it out. When he's seen 12 or more carries, he's averaged almost 20 fantasy points per game. He would have been like top 10 in that usage. So, and that's 12 or more. That's not even that heavy of usage.
No, it's not.
So the efficiency is 100% there. When he gets to work, he does damage. He's scoring all over the field, and he is amazing as a receiver. Maybe the best to come out of last year's class as a receiver. So I would not be shocked if he is right towards the list in terms of running back targets, running back receptions. In fact, they vacated over 65% of their targets from last year. So there is a wide open target totem pole. And I think this is their most talented player. They would be wise to structure everything around him. They're already coming out, though, and saying, Anthony Lynn, their offensive coordinator, Jamaal Williams is my big A back. Like, he's the one that you're going to pound up the middle. He's good in pass protection, so he's going to be in there too. So it does, and that's why you see a pretty even split not even 50-50, but, nice.
60-40 is not nothing. That's not bell cow stuff. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention your numbers on Williams. You got him for about 60-40 or the 40 end of the carries, the yards, but you did recently bump his touchdowns on the ground from like 3 to 7.
Yeah, I think that might be how they want to use this guy. DeAndre Swift is not the biggest guy, so I wouldn't be shocked to see him cede those goal line snaps. Jamaal Williams was the every down back when Swift missed their first preseason game. And I think the reason why I rank Swift a little bit lower than I project him for is these projections, of course, are over a 17-game season.
Right.
I don't think there's much of a chance we see Swift for all 17 games. He's already dealing with a groin injury in camp. Now, if we do, and you get this guy that I think could be the running back, as you said, 13 in fantasy at a 4th-round price right now as everyone's freaking about injuries, he could be a real league winner at that price. I still love going in at him in that late 3rd, early 4th range because there is so much upside in this talent and the available volume. Again, 65% of their targets vacated, 60% of their carries vacated with Kerryon Johnson and AP gone. There is the case for him to be an absolute monster. And Deuce Staley said we want to give him 25 touches a game. I don't buy a word he says. I don't believe that. He said the same thing for Miles Sanders last year, and that got us all nowhere. But I do think the upside is really high at his price. I just don't know that we'll see him for the amount of games to get him to that actual final statistical output.
All right, let's get into the receivers. And we are not really getting into the receivers because we think these guys are great fantasy options, but it's more like let's just marvel for a second about the receiving core that Jared Goff is going to be throwing to. So it's worth noting there have been a few changes as far as how you see these guys, the pecking order in the past. Yeah. You had Brashard Perryman as the captain of the ship, and then now it's Tyrell Williams. You even texted me. You said, "Oh, I've changed it a little." Now with Tyrell Williams being the target hog. Now, target hog numbers for Tyrell Williams put in 3 projections as your wide receiver 56 on your big board 65. So you don't even like him that much. Perryman, you have as your wide receiver 83 by projections. This is like these guys are both, you got them both catching 57 balls, although Williams you got getting about 800 yards, Perryman 550, and then 4 and 5 touchdowns respectively. Those are not lights out numbers. And then you got Amon-Ra St. Brown, maybe as the 3rd guy, 39 catches, 500 yards, 3 touchdowns. These are not exactly numbers that are blowing me away.
Nor should they be. 90 targets for your top receiver is not really a fantasy-like vein there. But there is always those receivers in those crappy wide receiver cores that we don't know who's the number one. You're looking at the Jets this year, the Saints until Michael Thomas comes back. And, of course, Detroit right here, right now. This was like the Terry McLaurin.
Except no one's coming back.
Right, exactly. There is nobody coming back for these guys. And in their first action, Tyrell Williams did see 4 targets from Jared Goff, led the team in terms of Jared Goff's targets, one of them coming in the end zone. And they're saying he's been the one most consistent, one available in camp, but also 2 just performance-wise. Tyrell Williams did have a 1,000-yard season just a couple years ago. He's been a little bit dinged up since then. But he's shown the ability to be a pretty big play, number one that can kind of do it all at like mediocre level. So out of this garbage depth chart, to me, he's the number one. He's worth like a around 13, 14 stab in case he does become like an actual viable, true number one. I think he's just the number one of a shitty core, though, and it ultimately won't lead to too much value. I do think he's worth drafting. Everyone else here I'm pretty much ignoring, other than maybe a last-round stab at St. Brown, because he is a rookie with some upside. They're already comparing him to Goff's next Cooper Kupp and that's not going to happen.
Come on, man. There's no rookie here in this receiving core that's going to break through into prominence with Jared Goff and these other guys taking pressure away from them. That's just not going to happen. I agree. Williams is probably the best guy in this group, but it's a low bar.
Right. St. Brown is their slot weapon too. So like in 3 receiver sets, he'll play there. What I was concerned with though in the preseason is when I went to 2 receiver sets, rather than giving this guy extensive work, moving him all over the place, seeing what the rookie can do, they took him off those snaps, which I don't like to see. He could, again, be the most valuable. He's certainly the most upside of this group is St. Brown. Should he become an every down threat? Should he actually live up to that Cooper Kupp hype? But I don't buy it. I'm not seeing it myself. The main vein of this passing attack is who we're going to be talking about next.
I don't want to get too into the ins and outs, X's and O's of football because you're just, that stuff in and out a lot better than I do. But aren't you going to stack the box against these guys?
Yeah.
Are you going to be like, well, we don't want to get burned on the outside by Brashard Perryman?
Exactly.
Right. You have to think this is going to kill like everybody.
It really could. The only thing that would keep them from potentially doing that, though, is Perriman and Quintez Cephas. They both have like very viable speed. I'm not saying they're good, but they do have the speed to really burn down the field. So it's tough for me to like say that with a straight face. Like, yeah, they're really going to be threatening defenses. Like, but they do have the speed that you have to at least account for. And because they're going to be playing from behind so far, I think this is going to end up being like, yeah, exactly. Like it's going to be just a very easy offense to stop. And there's not going to be a whole ton of points coming out of this Detroit's team.
All right, one guy that we do both like, TJ Hockenson at tight end. You got him for 84 catches, a little over 900 yards and 8 touchdowns and getting 123 targets, which is a lot of targets for a guy like him. You got him as your tight end 4 on projections. You also have him as your tight end 4 on the big board. Give me a couple seconds on Hockenson because he's a guy I like too.
Oh, yeah, it's easy to like him, especially when he falls to round 6 right now and could be behind only like Kelsey, Kittle, Waller on the target totem pole among tight ends. And in fact, there's some of those guys like Kittle. He might see Hockenson more targets than Kittle this year because he is truly the only real threatening option on this team. That 8 touchdowns would be by far a career high. For some reason, a big body and athletic guy, he hasn't really, similar to Kittle in that sense, had a big touchdown season yet. So I'm projecting that to change this year with no real other threats in the red zone other than maybe Swift. So 924 yards, 84 receptions. It's just a volume bet here. That puts him up to my number 4 tight end in my rankings. And a lot of people going for Pitts in round 4. And I love the upside of Pitts. Don't get me wrong. I think I'd much rather take whatever receiver or running backs are available there. Because by round 6, it starts to really thin out there. Hawkinson's just a glaring value in my opinion. Again, 130-ish targets from the tight end position that late. All day. That's the one. Him and Swift are really the only 2 guys I'm genuinely trying to buy. Maybe Tyrell Williams late within this offense.
I'm not interested in Swift. I could be interested in the other guys.
What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.